We are all in love. The weather outside is beautiful. I am looking forward to the weekend. You are listening to 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio. This is Uncanceled with Kevin Kietzman, and you may realize that I am not Kevin Kietzman. My name is Patrick Tuohey of the Show Me Institute, and if you're a longtime listener to Kevin Kietzman Uncanceled, you may be thinking, oh, Lord, what did he say now? But he's just on vacation. He will be back on Monday. There were rumors going around that he's taking the day off to observe the Blackout Friday, but I'm confident that is not the case. As I said earlier, my name is Patrick Tuohey. I want to spend just a minute or two introducing myself. I am a public policy researcher and writer. I focus on local and state policy in Missouri. I do a lot of that work for the Show Me Institute, which is a libertarian or free market, small government think tank. We focus on education policy, tax policy, again, at the city and state level. And I'll tell you, if high school Patrick knew that I was writing about tax policy and education policy as an adult, I would be horrified. And I think some of my math teachers would probably be horrified as well. But I love the work, and here we are. I've got a full show for you today. I want to spend the first few minutes talking about kind of how cities grow and economic development policy, and how we have changed the way that cities grew for hundreds of years in the United States. At 10:15, I'm very happy to have Jason Hancock of the Missouri Independent join me. We're going to talk about the state of the newspaper industry, and we're going to talk specifically about some of these deals we've read about in Kansas City and in Missouri for the Chiefs and the Royals. At 10:30, that is the Catholic segment of Uncanceled today, and I will have Matt Scanlon, a friend of mine, on, who is, I think you could easily say, Kansas City Irish royalty, to talk about beef and beer and fish fry. Lent starts next week, and so we've got to get prepared for that. And then at 10:45, I want to talk more specifically about the Royals, about the importance to them of having a downtown park, and what we can learn from other teams and franchises around the country, how they have leveraged the team to develop economically and really enrich the owners. You know, it used to be a city would grow organically. Maybe it would be at the site of a natural resource, for example, gold or coal, or maybe it was crossroads, two major paths cross and people set up a shop there to trade. Maybe it was a place where two rivers met, and so there was trade going on there. And it happened slowly and completely organically. There was no government regulation to protect us from ourselves, to tell us what we needed to do. You would, maybe set up a trading post, and then maybe you would set up some homes across the street or right around that trading post so that people could spend the night and go on their journey. Maybe you'd build a warehouse or something like that, just small stuff. And then if your city was being successful, more people would show up. Maybe you'd have secondary markets. So, for example, if it was, furriers who were coming down and trading pelts, if there was enough traffic, maybe you'd have somebody show up and set up a hotel. Maybe you'd have somebody show up and set up a saloon, right, or a general store. And again, it would grow naturally. That piece of land around the trading post, maybe you wanted to get more out of it, squeeze more value out of it. So you might tear down those little shacks and build a store, right, just a storefront. And then maybe after a few years, as your city continued to grow, that land would become more popular. You were getting a lot of foot traffic. And so you might tear down that corner store and maybe you might build a 3-story hotel. And you'd have commerce going on the first floor. And that was the gradual way that cities grew organically. And as they grew out from the downtown, the land that was most valuable downtown, you would get the most out of it by building up. And of course, as technology allowed, you could build higher and higher. But you didn't have regulators telling you how high you could build. You didn't have local governments giving subsidies to build something that otherwise wouldn't make sense. Cities grew. And if again, if you couldn't afford the land downtown, maybe you move out into the suburbs. But what's happened over the last several decades, actually 100 years, really, since the 1920s, is that government has got involved and they have meant well. They want to protect us from ourselves. And so they institute building code regulations, or maybe they decide here's what housing should look like, and here's how many units you should be able to put on a parcel of land. Or maybe they'll tell you this is how far back from your property line you have to build your house, or you can only build a single family house. You can't build a duplex or a quadplex or something like that. And again, the intention is good, but the result is that we drive up the price of housing, we drive up the price of doing business, and it chases business, commerce, maybe to the next county, to the next jurisdiction, or people are encouraged to kind of build outside the city line to get away from all this onerous regulation. And what's happened in, again, Kansas City is not unique, is we have misinterpreted what a successful city looks like. So think back to that little river town I was talking about. Slowly over time, as it demonstrates that it's a viable community, more people come in. And if there's demand, they build hotels. And if there's demand for a big ballroom or a music venue, they build them and they invest their own money because they see that there's a return on investment. And again, if you've got that strong market, if you do the basics, people want to move into your city. And so the hotels, the convention centers, the entertainment districts, those were all signs of a healthy economy, but they were lagging indicators, right? The healthy economy came first, and then those amenities came along afterwards. What's happened in recent history, and again, Kansas City is not unique. I want to say it started in the 80s, but there may be some examples of this earlier on, is city leaders looked at all those amenities, the hotels, the entertainment districts, the convention centers, right, the baseball parks, and they said, well, what if we just subsidize those things? Will that make our economy healthier, right? Basically, they're flipping the whole thing on its head. Rather than focusing on the basics and letting private industry and individual investors come along and build those amenities, cities said, well, what if we just skip all that, infrastructure and hard work stuff and just subsidize the development of all those amenities, all those high-rise buildings, those entertainment districts? Then we will look like we're a healthy city. And again, it just doesn't work. You and I drive around. I'll use downtown Kansas City as an example. Now, I moved here almost exactly 20 years ago, and I understand before I moved here, downtown was pretty moribund. There wasn't perhaps a lot of investment. And so what happened was the city, it's famously a bad idea now, but they struck a deal to have developers come in and build the Power and Light District, build the T-Mobile Center, and to do that investment. And you and I walk down the street and we see commerce, we see restaurants and bars, we see neon signs, and it is completely understandable that you and I would look at that and say, oh, this has been successful. Government policy has resulted in more economic development, more jobs, more businesses. This is a good idea. It's completely untrue. And I'll give you one example. I've actually got several, but I'll give you one example. So Kansas City, unlike a lot of cities, issues health cards. I don't think they do it anymore, but they did for a long time. Issue health cards to people who are bartenders and waiters. The card lasts for 3 years, but it's required if you're going to get a job in a restaurant or a bar. And so I went to liquor control, right, regulated industries, and I said, hey, can you give me all the data from the number of health cards and the number of liquor licenses that have been in existence each year for the past 20 years or something like that. And every few years, I would go up and update it with them. And I charted it out on a graph. Now, of course, I can't show it to you because this is radio, but the numbers were flat. And they were flat for a long time, and they were flat even after the Power and Light District was built. And what that tells us is, although there are more and different businesses in downtown Kansas City, citywide, we haven't created any new business. We haven't created any new commerce. We've simply diverted businesses that were elsewhere in the city. We've created an incentive for them to move downtown. So it looks like economic development, but it's really just diversion. And that is the lesson that we have got to learn in Missouri and all over the country, that economic development subsidies do not create anything new. They simply move things around. I'll follow up with this in about half an hour when I talk more about the Chiefs and the Royals and plans for a stadium. But up next, I'm going to have Jason Hancock from the Missouri Independent come on and talk to us about those things and about why in the world anyone would start a newspaper. This is Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio.
Oh, newspapermen meet such interesting people. They know the lowdown, now it can be told. I'll tell you quite reliably off the record about some charming people I have known.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. You're listening to 95.7 KCMO Radio. This is Patrick Tuohey sitting in for Kevin Kietzman. And let me set the stage for you. It's 2020. We have heard for years that newspapers are in decline, starting probably with Craigslist, eating a lot of ad revenue. Newspapers are shutting down. They're cutting back their publication date. And Jason Hancock in the state of Missouri decides this is a good time to start a newspaper. Jason, what were you thinking?
Well, I haven't, maybe I wasn't thinking. Maybe that's the answer.
Well, it's been a success. What is involved in starting a newspaper? And maybe I should start with why did you think this would work?
Well, so the Missouri Independent it's a nonprofit, and one could make the case that most of the news media is nonprofit at this point, I guess. But the whole goal behind it was, I've dedicated my career to state government and covering the state house in Iowa for a couple of years before I moved down to Missouri in 2011. And over that time, you just see this retrenching of state capital coverage. It's expensive. Most state capitals are not located in metropolitan areas. They're located in these little small places like Jefferson City or, Topeka. And so newspapers don't have the resources to send reporters there. And I'm biased, but I think that the state government is where most of the real governing has taken place. And so that was our mission. We wanted to try to raise some money, appeal to, people to say this is knowing what's happening in your state capital is important. And it's something that everyone in the state could benefit from, not just the places that can still afford to send reporters to Jeff City. And that's the mission. That's what we do. So we report the news, and we offer it almost as a wire service to other organizations around the state that have never had reporters or have pulled back in recent years. So you'll find our stories in the Joplin Globe and the Phelps County Focus and the St. Louis Post-Dispatch and papers and news organizations all over the state to let people know what's going on in their capital.
No, well, you're preaching to the choir on this because I have been focusing on state and local politics for such a long time, and it's frustrating that people get, I won't say distracted, but get consumed by national stories over which they have the least influence and ignore what's going on in their own backyard over which they have the most influence. And the pandemic, I think, demonstrated or reminded to us that, look, it really is your local health department that has enormous ability to control your livelihood, whereas kind of what goes on in Washington is so much further away.
Yeah, absolutely.
So speaking about state and local, you guys at the Missouri Independent have published a number of stories about what's going on with Chiefs and Royals stadium deals. Do you have kind of a 30-second cap of what's going on and where we are?
We had officials from Jackson County and the Capitol this week. They met with the governor. They met with top legislative leaders. This was sort of at the urging of House Speaker John Patterson. He wanted to see a plan. He wanted Jackson County officials to start moving forward with something, because if you want to get any sort of funding from the state for this, there's going to be fierce resistance. Step one has to be, at least according to the folks at the Capitol, local buy-in. There has to be some skin in the game locally, and then the state can come and be helpful. But there's just going to be a lot of potential landmines. And if Jackson County is not on board and ready to put some money up, and Jackson County voters aren't supportive, there's not going to be a lot of effort to get it done here in Jeff City. It's not going to get across the finish line.
I'm talking to Jason Hancock with the Missouri Independent. So, Jason, you've been covering these stories, like you said, for years. Is it standard practice that the government thinks that it should be the first actor rather than a team being the first actor? Because a lot of people say, what is government doing to keep the Royals, keep the Chiefs? It seems to me it's the incumbent on the team owners to first make their ask, but that's not what we have here.
Well, it's sort of this zero-sum game, right, where you have, Missouri and the Missouri legislature, Missouri legislative leaders, the governor, they feel like they have no choice, because if they don't act, Kansas has already acted. It's almost just like no one's, we were supposed to have this border war truce, but as, Laura Kelly said at one point, that doesn't apply to these teams. But we tried to get out of this game, the Missouri-Kansas back and forth, where we were just poaching each other's companies and businesses, because there was this like, we can't quit because you won't quit, and it's a circular thing. And that's kind of where we're at with these teams. I think the state would want to step in and feel like they should step in. Same with the Jackson County, legislature. But now they feel like they have to, because the alternative is the Royals have got a great deal waiting for them potentially over in Kansas. And so you have Jackson County and you have Clay County folks too starting to offer ideas about legislation that could potentially kind of lay the groundwork for the teams.
I want to talk to you about something you guys published over the last few weeks about, maybe some backroom deals to encourage politicians to play along. But before that, do you have a sense as to whether or not there will be a public vote in Jackson County or anywhere over this? Because I know the teams would love to avoid that.
I don't know how you could avoid it, because you're going to have to find the money somewhere. And in Missouri, most of the time, if it's a tax increase, it has to go to the voters. And so I think that's what, what I'm hearing from folks, and I'm not as close to the issue in Jackson County as you are, but in Jefferson City, what I'm hearing folks say is they'd like to see this issue on the ballot, because that is going to help grease the skids if the state does need to do something. They want voter buy-in. They want the Jackson County, again, to have some skin in the game.
So I wrote recently in my guest column for the Kansas City Star that I was called by representatives of the heavy constructors in Kansas City. It was a fundraising call for the recall effort from Frank White. So, the supporters of a new stadium see Frank White as an obstacle and want to get rid of him. Again, politically, that makes sense to me. I don't think it helps them get to a yes vote from the county, but that's one thing they're doing. That is similar to what you wrote a few weeks ago, what you guys published a few weeks ago about what the supporters of the Royals are doing to keep Quentin Lucas in their corner. Can you remind my audience about that?
Well, I think you're talking about, this idea of, we've written a lot about the nonprofit that the mayor has.
That's right.
And sort of is used for entertainment purposes and travel and Chiefs tickets. And there's been some criticism of that, obviously the Royals, I believe, were one of the contributors to that nonprofit at one point. But, there was also some polling that was done that was paid for by a PAC that was supportive of the mayor and commissioned by the mayor's campaign itself, that tried to sort of punch a hole in the idea of a Clay County stadium site.
Yeah, that's right.
That's gotten some people upset, because they feel like if we take one side off the table, that just hurts our chances of keeping the team in Missouri. So the mayor is definitely in the middle of a lot of these discussions. He wasn't up in the Capitol that I saw. It was Jackson County officials that were here this week. But I assume that any sort of plan moving forward is going to have some buy-in from the mayor and Kansas City officials as well.
Well, Jason, I'm really grateful for your time this morning and the work you guys are doing at the Missouri Independent. What's the URL? Where can people find you online?
We're at MissouriIndependent.com, very cleverly named. So yeah, please come check us out. It's free, no ads. You can subscribe to our daily newsletter for free.
I'm so grateful, and keep up the great work. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, up next, we're going to have Kansas City Irish royalty Matt Scanlon to talk to us about meat, beer, and fish. This is Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio.
car, and my phone, anywhere.
KCMO Talk Radio, now on FM at 95.7, Kansas City's place to talk. From Gardner to Grain Valley, it's Kevin Kietzman Uncanceled on 95.7 FM KCMO Talk Radio.
Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio. I have got Matt Scanlon with me to talk about, everything Irish in Kansas City, everything Irish Catholic in Kansas City. Certainly, you are Kansas City Irish nobility. You started a barbecue tournament in Waldo, and you've headed up a fish fry at a local parish for years. Tell us, how does a family get involved in all this stuff?
Well, we'll go back to the Irish Fest here in Kansas City, which is Labor Day weekend down at Crown Center. It started in Brookside and Westport as two little neighborhood festivals. My dad was actually one of the founders in the Brookside Irish Fest. And when those two merged and created Kansas City Irish Fest, they formed it, and it's become one of the biggest festivals in Kansas City. Since then...
Forgive me, it's one of the biggest in the country, isn't it?
We're the third largest Irish Fest in the country.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And so currently I am the sitting president for Irish Fest. We had our meeting last night and kind of kicked up the high holy holidays with St. Patrick's Day coming up and all our parade events that we're doing. It's a lot of fun to be involved in that.
I've been going for years. I see you walk around with a walkie-talkie. I imagine 90% of your calls are either we're out of beer at this tent or there's a drunk woman stuck in a porta-john.
The out of beer, we have figured that out. We don't like that to happen very much. The drunk woman stuck in the porta potty, it's such a family-friendly event that we just don't have that type of shenanigans very much.
What does family-friendly mean after 8 p.m.?
After 8 p.m., there's still kids out listening to music with the family, so no one really gets out of hand at the Irish Fest. We don't have arrests. We don't have anything like that.
No, in fact, I do notice that every year because maybe I kind of look for it, considering how many people come through over the 3 days. And it's something like 80,000 people or more. There is a shockingly low level of violence or fighting, if anything at all.
Yeah, nothing. I mean, we don't have arrests. I mean, over our 20-plus year history, just doesn't happen. It's just a really good family event.
So again, that's a family thing that you've been doing for years. And then I guess because you had too much time on your hands, you decided we need one more barbecue tournament. Tell us about that.
So a couple of parishioners up at our local parish, you and I share the same parish as St. Elizabeth's, had the idea of starting a barbecue tournament. And they had reached out to a buddy of ours, and he says, well, I'm not doing this without Matt. So they pulled me in. We started planning this tournament, and we're going on our 15th year this year. And it is a great neighborhood event, music and barbecue. And I think we had 42 teams last year. So
no, it's if for some reason in Kansas City you are not familiar with it, it's hosted by at St. Elizabeth's Parish, which is roughly 75th and Warnell. And it happens in September, I believe.
It does, the third weekend in September.
And what's great about it, it is a legit barbecue tournament in a kind of urban setting.
It is.
And people in the neighborhood will walk by, and they're kind of looking for the entrance. They're looking for where do I pay to get in? And we're like, no, this is free. What I like about it, and anybody who's active in their local church will appreciate this as well, it's not a fundraiser.
It's not a fundraiser.
It's not a capital campaign or anything like that. It's just a party for the parishioners and the neighborhood.
It's a community event. When the parish, we got it approved to do it with them, they said, no, we don't want it to be a fundraiser. We want a good community event. So Friday night, we have the smoker selection where during the band is going on, you can get and vote on different samples. If you go to a lot of barbecue tournaments, you don't have the ability to walk up and get something to eat at the different booths, whereas Smokin' Waldo, you do.
No, it's remarkable. I wonder, do you ever get noise complaints from the neighbors? Because I know you spend the week or more in advance papering the neighborhood and telling them about it.
We do. And after 15 years, I think we've got it to the point where, no, we don't. We used to get phone calls, but we pulled them noise permits and things like that. But we have not been getting those of late.
So we've talked about beer and meat, but I had you on because you have for years been involved with overseeing the fish fry. So Lent starts next week, Ash Wednesday, and St. Elizabeth's and lots of Catholic churches on the Kansas and Missouri side have these fish fries. Did you grow up attending them? Because St. E's is relatively new, if I'm correct.
We are relatively new. I think we started in 2009. Yes, I grew up attending them. Christ the King, one of the older Knights of Columbus councils, had them when we were kids. We would go to, and even when we'd come back from college, they were ingenious how they'd build a kegerator on a dolly. They'd weld on a half barrel on this thing and have the tap on the handle of the. But it was a great neighborhood event. So when we looked at starting a Knights of Columbus council at St. Elizabeth's, they wanted to do a fish fry. Fortunately, we had a couple of us that, Chris Storm, our good friend, was a Kansas City icon chef who taught us all how to scale up and really put out great food.
And again, I recommend anybody. I should say you don't have to be Catholic to attend.
That's correct.
They don't check ID or rosary at the door, but it is a great fundraiser for the Knights of Columbus, and I imagine the Knights run it at most parishes. But it goes to all sorts of good projects, and every Knights will have their own priority. But it's a great way to get together. The food is good. You get to see people in your parish, and it is kind of a family event. Lots of parishes will have them throughout the area. But I've got to say, to your credit and the other folks at the Knights at St. Elizabeth's, you've spent the last year or so completely redoing the kitchen. This small parish has a commercial-grade kitchen, and you're able to turn out an incredible amount of food at a pretty good quality.
What is nice is that we took a lot of Chris Storm's recipes, and so everything in the fish fry is scratch made. I used to be a fishmonger and sold fresh fish to restaurants all over Kansas City for years. And so I know my fish. And so we bring in fresh, never frozen salmon. You're going to cut it down on Thursday night and portion it up, and we'll put it in the fridge and be ready to roast that. It's a lemon, garlic, butter, white wine sauce that we do on that salmon.
How many people come through there on a given Friday?
Friday, it's anywhere between 500 and 700. We'll turn the room probably twice. And it's a big, we redid that all a couple years ago, and we're going to base.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, I am biased. I'd love to have you come to St. Elizabeth's again at 75th and Warnell, but you'll be able to find a fish fry probably every weekend throughout the Archdiocese on the Kansas and the Diocese on the Missouri side. And again, it's a great opportunity to kind of get out of the house. For Catholics, it's fasting. Maybe an all-you-can-eat fish fry isn't exactly in the spirit of fasting, but certainly as far as community and charity, it fits the bill.
Absolutely. We do ours March 7th. Then we take a break for the High Holy Holidays. We have spring break and St. Patrick's Day in there. So we take 2 weeks off. Then we'll be back March 28th and April 4th.
I always try to get St. Patrick's Day off of work as a religious holiday, and it has not worked yet. Matt Scanlon, I am grateful for your time. Thank you so much for joining us. Up next, everybody, we're going to talk more about baseball and stadiums and economic development. But again, next week starts Lent at Wednesday. Get right with God, and let's prepare for Easter. This is Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 KCMO Talk Radio.
Call Kevin Kietzman, 913-408-7957. Now on 95.7 FM.
Good morning, everybody. This is Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 FM, KCMO Talk Radio. They put me in, Coach, for Kevin Kietzman, who is out. He is observing the Blackout Friday, I believe, but he will be back on Monday with all the mis, dis, and malinformation you have come to expect from his show. I talked a little bit at the top of the hour about economic development subsidies and how cities grow, and I want to follow up on that. A lot of times when I write or I am interviewed, we're talking about a small part of a bigger picture. We're talking maybe about a streetcar or a hotel or some sort of subsidy. And I want to take this opportunity to kind of back up and talk more broadly about economic development subsidies. And it's important to understand, the Kansas City Star article that came out last night and is top of the paper this morning by Sam McDowell, that talked about the deals in Jeff City for the teams, the Royals and the Chiefs. Sam, to his credit, mentioned in the piece, research over several decades has regularly found that stadiums and arenas are not major drivers of economic development. And again, this is not a right-wing thing or a left-wing thing. It is all over the place. All sorts of research by organizations that would surprise you say that these deals don't work. And I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a significant developer in Kansas City who should have understood this issue, but didn't. I had to explain it to him. So let's back up. Let's say that a new grocery store is built across the street from your house. Now, you may go and spend your money at that new grocery store, but you won't also go to the old grocery store that you previously shopped at, right? Just because there's a new store doesn't mean you've got twice the money to spend or twice the need for groceries. You change your behavior. You don't increase your spending. The problem with economic development subsidies and the private employees or the government employees that encourage them is that they don't look at the total picture. They simply look at the new spending that is happening at the new place and call that a win. And it is crazy. I tell people when I first started working at the Show Me Institute years ago, they explained this to me, and I couldn't believe that it was true because it seems so ridiculous. But let me give you a great example. So I talked earlier about the Power and Light District in downtown Kansas City and about how that project didn't create any new jobs. It merely diverted restaurant and bar traffic jobs from elsewhere in the city to downtown. They diverted economic activity. They didn't create any new economic activity. Well, the same is true of the H&R Block building down there. And it's this kind of tall oval glass building that you've probably seen if you've driven around downtown. And I think that was built in 2007, 2008. It was one of the first projects built down there. And again, the city claimed that we have created, I think it was 1,600 new jobs. And if you're driving by or walking down the street, you see that glass building and you think to yourself, wow, that's economic development. A private company has invested in Kansas City. That's great. These government policies are bearing fruit, right? Our mayor, our city council are job creators. But in fact, that is not what happened. And effectively, it's a mirage. What happened was the city subsidized H&R Block to build this high-rise building. And the company didn't create 1,600 new jobs as a result. They simply closed all their satellite offices around the region and moved everyone into that downtown building. So the Economic Development Corporation could say, well, there's 1,600 new jobs here at this site. And that may be true, but it's not the full picture. You should be asking, well, where did those jobs come from? And the bitter irony of all of downtown development is that those jobs, whether they're H&R Block jobs or whether they're bar and restaurant jobs, moved from parts of town where those businesses paid property and income and sales tax to the city and county to pay for all the services that we agree are important, right? Police, libraries, schools. And they took all that and they moved it downtown to a location where those taxes were given back to the developers to pay for the buildings they built. So in effect, we didn't just kind of move chairs around. We actually lost revenue from the city's point of view because that revenue that we were getting now go to the developer. And so you and I can drive around and we can look at new construction. You know, the Cerner headquarters down in South Kansas City is exactly the same example. You drive by it, you might see economic activity and think, this is new, this is great, politicians are job creators. But in reality, nothing has happened. A friend of mine who studies economic development subsidies says that these packages, these incentives don't create jobs, but they allow politicians to claim that they create jobs. And of course, in politics, that observation, that image is super important. And that's important too when we talk about downtown baseball. So again, I know I'm repeating myself, but I sometimes find that I've got to explain this to politicians several times. So bear with me. Right now, if you were to go to a Royals game, you would, and again, I go with kind of professional Royals attendees who tailgate. So you stop at a grocery store, you stop at a liquor store, then you drive to the game and you tailgate. And of course, you go in and watch the game itself, and you have a particular budget, whatever it is, $100, $500, whatever you want to spend. Now, if we were to pick up that ballpark and drop it downtown, your behavior would change, but you wouldn't necessarily spend any more money. So instead of going to the grocery store and the liquor store, you might go to the park, you might go get a beer at a bar in the area beforehand, or maybe after the game, you'll stay downtown and you'll buy dinner. But you're not necessarily spending any more. You're just spending differently. Now, the people who say that baseball parks or any of these big projects drive economic development, what they do is they will only count the spending at the new facility. They do not subtract the lack of spending at the old location. So building a park doesn't create any economic development. There is no economic development impact from these stadia.
Hey, that Taco Bell down there by the stadiums has been doing pretty well.
Well, okay, no, you're exactly right, and I'll talk about that in a second. So there are businesses in the periphery that might do well, but what John Sherman or any team owner wants to do is say, well, I want to own that Taco Bell, right? I not only want the money that you're getting in the stadium, but I want to own the bars and restaurants around you. And so they build these entertainment districts because, sadly, owning a team is not really a revenue source anymore. It's sort of like the anchor to a bigger development. And there is a great story if you know of the website Field of Schemes. The author there has talked a great deal about what happened in Baltimore. So the Orioles wanted to sell, or the Angelos family wanted to sell the Orioles. And what they did was they negotiated a number of economic development packages and deals with the city to own, property and develop property around the park. And then once they had all that in place, and again, this was just contracts and negotiations and subsidies. Once they had all that in place, they sold the team. Well, the result of all those developments added 1/3 of value to the Baltimore Orioles. And it wasn't because the team was good. It was simply because the package included all sorts of economic development subsidies. So the way I describe this to an awful lot of people is it's sort of like getting a red St. Valentine's Day card in the mail. You're excited because you think, oh my gosh, someone sent me a card, somebody loves me, and then you open it up and the card is from your mom. And you realize, oh, it doesn't count. She has to love me. When you see these big projects, when you hear these big arguments, just understand we're not creating anything new, we're just moving it around. Thank you so much for your time today. This has been Patrick Tuohey on 95.7 KCMO Radio. Have a great weekend, and I will see you at the Fish Fries next week.